Before we begin, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, like, comment, and share this video, especially if you've ever felt torn between who you are and who you're pretending to be. Let me ask you something. What if the moment you thought would destroy you ended up setting you free? This is not the kind of story people are proud to tell. And to be honest, I almost didn't. I mean, how do you admit to becoming that woman? The unfaithful wife, the one who crossed the line, the one whose story of betrayal became a permanent scar? But if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or unloved, then maybe my forbidden testimony is also yours. Because what happened between me and my black boss wasn't just a shocking revelation. It was a mirror I had been avoiding for years. People love to judge a story once it's already broken. But no one ever asks what led to the explosion about betrayal. No one looks at the silence that came before the scream. And trust me, there's always silence before the scream. So if you're ready for the real story, not the one polished for social media, but the true, intimate, uncomfortable confession of infidelity and emotional betrayal, stay with me. This might hurt, but it might also heal. I know what it feels like to wake up every day with that sinking feeling that you're chasing something you'll never catch. The clock doesn't stop, the inbox never empties, and deadlines just keep piling up. At work, I was seen as the strong woman, the go-getter, the problem solver, but at home, I felt invisible. My husband was there, physically present, but emotionally miles away. That emotional absence became louder than any argument we could have had. No matter how hard I tried to hide it, the truth echoed louder each day. I was alone. Alone in the marriage. Alone in the decisions. Alone in the silence. His eyes barely met mine anymore. Our conversations turned into hollow exchanges. That disconnect left me vulnerable in ways I wasn't ready to admit. And in that fragile state, I started to notice warmth coming from the least expected place, work. Our house became just a space where two strangers lived. Everything felt transactional. What used to be passion turned into protocol. And it's in those silent cracks that betrayal begins to plant its roots. One simple good morning from someone at the office felt warmer than any sentence my unfaithful spouse had uttered in months. It's wild, isn't it? How easy it is to mistake kindness for love when your heart's been starving. The truth? I didn't go looking for infidelity. I didn't crave a story of betrayal. But when you're deprived of affection, even a shared smile can feel like a lifeline. At work, where I was supposed to give, I began to receive. Not just respect, but attention, kindness, presence. And it came from someone I never expected, a presence that soon began to change everything. He wasn't just my boss, he was the kind of man who made people pause when he entered a room. His voice commanded attention, not through volume, but through presence. There was something magnetic about him. He saw me, really saw me, in a way I hadn't felt in years. His compliments weren't about looks, they were about competence, leadership, the fire I brought into meetings. And when you've been dismissed at home for so long, that kind of validation hits deep. Little by little, I started looking forward to our conversations. They were still professional, technically. But there was a warmth behind every word, a respect that didn't feel forced. We shared ideas, strategies, late hours, but more than that, we shared admiration. Genuine admiration. And when someone values your mind, your perspective, your strength, it's hard not to feel drawn to that energy. Especially when your own partner stopped seeing your worth long ago. I remember one meeting where I presented a project I'd worked on for weeks. The room was quiet, and he was the first to speak. "This is brilliant," he said, with that subtle smile of his. And it wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. Like he meant every word. Like he believed in me more than I believed in myself. That was the first time I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't physical, not yet, but it was powerful. At home, I was a shadow. At work, I felt alive. And no, this isn't some justification for the act of infidelity. It's a confession. A forbidden testimony of how emotional betrayal begins long before any kiss, before any touch. It starts in the moments when someone finally gives you what you've been begging for in silence. And soon those moments start to mean more than they should. It started in the smallest of gestures. A lingering glance that lasted half a second too long. A light touch on my back as he walked past me in the hallway. Those moments were so subtle, so easy to dismiss, until they weren't. There's a certain kind of silence between two people that says more than words ever could. I began to feel it in the air between us, that quiet tension, that unspoken question hanging between every interaction. I'd catch myself holding my breath when he stood too close. My heart would race over the most innocent moments, a shared laugh, a meeting that went just a little overtime. I told myself it was harmless. After all, he hadn't crossed any line. Neither had I. But deep down, I knew that what we were building wasn't just professional anymore. It was emotional. It was dangerous. It was a slow-burning flame I couldn't ignore. He started remembering the little things, my favorite coffee, how I liked to organize my files, the songs I listened to while working late. Those details felt intimate. They weren't romantic, but they were personal. And when someone starts noticing what your husband forgot years ago, that attention becomes addictive. That's how stories of infidelity begin, not with sex, but with emotional connection. That's the real act of betrayal most people never talk about. I wasn't naive. I knew this wasn't just chemistry. It was temptation dressed in charm. He never said anything inappropriate. He didn't need to. The energy spoke for itself. And while I kept telling myself I had control, every glance, every shared smile chipped away at my resistance. Because desire doesn't always come roaring in. Sometimes it tiptoes quietly into your life and waits for the perfect moment. It was supposed to be just another long night at the office. A project deadline, some late emails, the usual grind. But something about that night felt different from the start. The building was quiet. Just the two of us, the soft hum of the AC, the glow of desk lamps casting shadows. We were tired, laughing more freely than usual, letting the conversation drift from work to life, from facts to feelings. And then it happened. That moment when time seemed to pause and everything changed. He reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. It was so gentle, so natural that I didn't move. I couldn't. His touch was warm, grounding, nothing like the cold distance I'd grown used to at home. And in that instant, the line we'd both been so careful not to cross simply vanished. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even spoken. But when he leaned in, I didn't stop him. I let myself fall into that kiss like it was the first breath after being underwater too long. What followed was not just passion. It was a storm of emotions I didn't know I had buried. I wanted to feel seen, wanted, chosen. And for the first time in years, I did. I felt desired, not out of obligation, but out of genuine hunger. It's strange how one act can feel both utterly wrong and deeply validating at the same time. That moment was my explosion about betrayal. Raw, reckless, and real. A line crossed that could never be uncrossed. I don't remember how we got from the office to the hotel. I just remember the silence after. A heavy, sobering silence. I had become the unfaithful wife, the unfaithful partner. But more than that, I had become someone I didn't recognize. And yet, a part of me felt awake, as if I had just stepped into a truth I'd been avoiding for years. But that clarity came with a price. And guilt? It was already knocking on my door. The next morning, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror without feeling that crushing weight in my chest. Guilt doesn't shout, it whispers. It lingers in the quiet moments, in the shower, in your coffee cup, in the eyes of your spouse who still doesn't know. I kept asking myself, what have I done? But deep down, I already knew. I had committed an act of infidelity that couldn't be undone, no matter how many times I replayed the night in my head. And then there was the power dynamic. He was my boss, a man I admired, yes, but also someone who held influence over my career. That made everything more complicated. Was I just a woman who cheated on her husband out of loneliness? Or was I manipulated? Was there a balance of power? Or was I just too desperate to feel wanted to see clearly? These weren't just questions. They were echoes of a deeper truth I didn't want to face. I kept wondering if what happened was about him, or if it was really about me. Was I trying to reclaim a part of myself I'd lost along the way? Or was I just running from the pain of a marital breakup that had started long before the betrayal? I thought of all the other stories of infidelity I had judged so harshly before, and suddenly I saw them through new eyes. Infidelity and betrayal are never black and white. They live in the gray, in the silence, in the space between what we want and what we fear. I couldn't stop asking myself if this had been a confession of a forbidden love or just a moment of weakness. Was it passion or was it survival? I didn't know yet, but one thing was clear. I had to face my reflection. Not just the woman who made the choice, but the woman who is aching underneath that choice. And as painful as it was, that moment of reckoning was only the beginning. There's a strange kind of clarity that comes after destruction. Once the dust settles, once the tears stop falling, you're left with yourself, raw, exposed, undeniable. I realized that what hurt the most wasn't the act of betrayal itself, but the emptiness that led me there. The truth was, I didn't just betray my husband. I had been betraying myself for years. Smiling when I was broken. Staying when I was lost. Pretending everything was fine when my soul was screaming for more. That night with him wasn't about love. It wasn't even about desire. It was about escape. About feeling something, anything, that reminded me I was still alive. I had become a divorced woman after betrayal, at least in my mind, long before the marriage was legally over. The story of infidelity I lived wasn't just about a forbidden confession. It was about trying to find myself in the ruins of a life I didn't choose anymore. And that was a hard pill to swallow. I started to see my reflection not as a failure, but as a woman in transition. A woman who had made mistakes, yes, but also a woman who had finally stopped hiding from her truth. I asked myself, what do I want now? Not what society expected, not what my husband needed, not what my boss admired, but what I, deep down, truly craved. And that's where the real story of betrayal ended, and a new story of self-awareness began to unfold. So many women walk around carrying the weight of stories they never tell. Secrets buried. Hidden truths. Testimonies of infidelity no one ever hears because shame keeps them silent. But this isn't just my story. It's the story of anyone who's ever lost themselves inside a relationship and dared to look in the mirror to ask, who am I really and what do I want now? And now I want to ask you something. How long have you been hiding parts of yourself just to keep a version of love alive that no longer feeds your soul? How many times have you swallowed your truth just to avoid rocking the boat, only to end up drowning in silence? The act of infidelity may have marked me, but it also woke me up. Because sometimes betrayal isn't the end, it's the beginning of finally choosing you. I'm not here to glorify what I did, but I am here to shed light on what most people don't talk about. The emotional betrayal that happens long before anyone touches another body. The breakdown of intimacy, the absence of connection, the feeling of being married and still profoundly alone. If any of that resonates with you, then maybe it's time to stop judging the surface and start asking the real questions underneath. So I'll leave you with this. What are you pretending not to feel? What truth are you afraid to say out loud? And what would happen if, for just one moment, you finally stopped lying to yourself? Leave your story in the comments. Let's talk about the pain behind betrayal. Let's talk about the truth. Like this video if it touched something inside you. Subscribe and turn on notifications to keep learning, healing, and growing. This isn't just a story of betrayal. This is a wake-up call. Are you listening?